Also, I want to tell you all tonight that if you do have a cell phone or a smart device with you, we're going to be doing some interactive polling. And if you go to menti.com and enter the code that's on the screen, which is 82706064, or you can use the QR code on the right. And this information will pop up from time to time during the presentation tonight. So if you miss it at the beginning, there's always an opportunity to get to it a little bit later. And again, if you are unable to participate in that way, don't worry about it. We've got other ways for you to share with us tonight. Again, you are attending tonight's Measure C virtual meeting. My name is Kendall Flint, and I'm a consultant that's working with the Fresno Council of Governments on the development of a new expenditure plan for Measure C, which is our half-cent sales tax that's been around for about 40 years here in Fresno County, and that's funding a variety of different types of transportation projects and infrastructure throughout the region. Joining me tonight, and I'll have him give a little wave, is Robert Phipps. He's the Executive Director of the Fresno COG. We also have Paul Herman, who's the Deputy Director of the Fresno Council of Governments, Brenda Thomas, who manages our public engagement and outreach communications. And then we also have Moses Stipes, who's with us tonight in his capacity as working with the Fresno County Rural Transportation Authority. So what we're here to do tonight is really talk about Measure C and really what it has meant to the greater Fresno region. Over the last 20 years, Measure C has brought in about $10 billion. Now, $2.1 billion is a direct result of sales tax revenue. And that's when you go to the store and buy a shirt, a book, a refrigerator, an appliance, whatever that might look like. That's all the taxes that were collected in Fresno County and all the local cities over that past 20 years. Now, we've been collecting this tax since 1986. That'll be important later, so try to remember that. But the most important thing, at least in the last 20 years, is that it's not just the 2.1 billion in revenue that we get from our local folks, but it's the grants and the other things that we use to leverage additional funding from the state and from the federal government. And that brings in an additional 8 billion. And that's how we get to the $10 billion that Fresno has received as part of Measure C over the past 20 years. So basically, for every dollar that we pay in taxes, we pick up another $4 in terms of matching funds and or grants that support that. Now, one of the other fun things about Fresno is that it has a great zoo, a fantastic baseball team, and it's also the gateway to a number of national parks and other places where people like to go. About 25% of the revenue that's generated from Measure C comes from visitors, and that could be your friends and family that are coming to the area. It could also be people that are just passing through. This includes, of course, truck drivers and people who do business throughout the San Joaquin Valley. And it's important that they are paying those taxes too, because they are also using our roads. And that's one of the reasons that these regional taxes do well for the entire area, is because it does find a way to capture that additional revenue that some agencies might not see. Most folks worry about, boy, what is it going to cost me? And when we look at the actual average cost per family, and we're talking about probably a family of four, two adults, two children, it's about $8 a month. Now, some families have lower income and they may spend a little bit less, and others may have a little more money and they may spend a little bit more. But on average, that's about the amount that each of these households pays on an annual basis. Now, I'm going to ask you a few more questions as we go through this particular presentation today. And as you remember, if you haven't done so already, if you can go to menti.com and enter the code you see on the screen, 82706064, or use the QR code. And you can see there's a fun little thumbs up on the corner. So if you hit that, that kind of tells me that you're having fun with this so far. So let's ask the first question. And we're going to go this a little bit slowly because it's also being translated into Spanish. When was Measure C first passed by voters? And so what we know is you might have been given a hint a little bit earlier. And I see someone's already got that in. That's right. It was 1986. And so what's really important about that is that some people think that this is a new tax or something that is being newly introduced to the area. And it is not. This has been part of our income stream again for those past 40 years. And over that time, the measure has funded a number of really important projects. 180 was funded in part by Measure C, improvements to Highway 41. And we'll talk a little bit more about those kinds of agencies as we move through. So one question we get a lot is, how can I tell what was spent from Measure C in my community? This is the measurec.com website. And if you visit this particular site, you'll see on the right there where it says programs and projects. And if you click on that at home, you'll be able to bring up a listing of the investments that were done in your city, in your community over those past 20 years. And so all 15 cities have their own page, as well as the county. But remember, Measure C is not just for roads, it also funds transit, it funds safe routes to schools, it funds aviation, improvements for our local airport, and all kinds of things that are very important to our community. So in the current measure, and this is the measure that is on the books right now, we have an allocation that's done by category. Now, this measure will continue to be moving forward up until the 2027 timeframe, right? So if Measure C is not renewed in some way, shape, or form in 2026, this particular project will go away. So in the current measure, I just kind of want to go through with you what it has in there now. Currently, about 34.69% goes to local transportation programs. That's what you consider your local streets and roads in your neighborhoods, places where you will go to work, go to school, move around. About 30% of that goes to the regional transportation program. And that's the larger projects, things like interchanges, large budget projects that affect multiple communities and theoretically improve transportation options in those areas. Then we have the regional public transit program, and that's basically buses, which I think you see throughout the county. We have 3 transit providers, and I'll talk in a minute about how they get their funding. There was a grade separation program in the last measure for about 6%, and that's when you have roads that come up to railroad crossings and they separate those things out, either going over or under. Environmental enhancement was opportunities and programs that funded things that put people out of their single vehicle cars. So this could be things like Senior Script or CalVans or other programs that are supported to move people throughout our region. And then at 1.5% goes to administrative costs. And these really are the oversight of Measure C funds, the annual audits, public outreach to make sure people know where Measure C funds are being spent, and of course, opportunities that the agencies use to apply for grants at both the state and federal level in order to extend the use of these measure funds so that they have more going on. Now, I'm going to give you a snapshot of just one city, but as I mentioned, there are all the cities have background on their local investment programs on the measurec.com website. But in Fresno, as an example, the city received approximately $192 million between 2007 and 2024. And these were allocated, as you can see on screen here, for street maintenance, ADA compliance, that's the making it easier for people in wheelchairs or mobility challenged folks to get from point A to point B. Flexible funding, which allowed the city to allocate funds both for local roads and maybe for some larger projects. 20 million was spent on pedestrians and trail systems within the city, and then another 5 million was spent on bicycle infrastructure. And that would be anything from class 1 to class 4 bike lanes. Some of them are completely separate, and some of them are part of the roadways that are sharing with our existing roads with cars and everything else. Now, one thing that we know is very important in transportation is transit. And though most people in the county do get around using their own personal vehicles, we have about 25,000 households that do not have a car. So when you look at some of the folks that are using transit, we can estimate that about 80% of transit users in the county are entirely dependent on public transportation, which means using the buses are really their only means of getting from point A to point B and to take care of their daily lives. Now, the 3 transit agencies that operate here are the Fresno Area Express, that's FACTS, that's for the city of Fresno. And then we have Clovis Transit and the Fresno County Rural Transit Agency. And so each of these 3 takes a percentage of those funds, and is able to use those to provide those services, to subsidize services, which make it more affordable for folks to access public transit, and also help support the routes that exist today. So, for example, with the Fresno County Rural Transit Agency, they're able to offer free rides to seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, and all kinds of other things happen during that time. They do get funding from other agencies and other state revenue funds, but Measure C is very important to their efforts. Now you see here, this is the city of Clovis, just as another example. They got about $41.5 million in funding, and it supported a number of programs throughout the city, including the most recent one, which would be the local transit center, which was completed in the last couple of years. And so each city is able to use Measure C funds to really their highest and best use in terms of what their local folks want to see in each of these communities. And then I want to point out here some of the other programs, and some of these are almost entirely funded by Measure C. So here we have with the ADA seniors and public paratransit, and these are folks that may be getting to and from medical appointments and whatnot. That is 100% funded by Measure C. You may have heard of CalVans, and these are farm worker van pools and business van pools that are subsidized and paid for by Measure C. And there's also funds for new technology, and that's everything from working with signalization, making the lights work all at the same time, to enhancements that we might see with our transportation network. So these programs are just other things that are 100% funded by Measure C and would be subject to termination if there was no Measure C moving forward. So what we're really here tonight is to talk about the Measure C renewal plan. And so right now, this is a reimagine. What we're asking folks is to tell us what they would like to see in a new expenditure plan. So the slate, if you will, is wiped clean. And some of the percentages that I just talked about, those are not off, they're off the table at this point. We can change the numbers, we can move things around, and we can adapt this plan to meet the needs of our local agencies and residents like you who are interested in the future. We have a great website for this called measurec2026.com. And on this site, there's an opportunity which will be open until the end of next week. Very important, just till the end of next week. It's been open for several months now, actually, I think since March, April. But it gives you the opportunity to tell us how you would allocate funds. So if for any reason tonight you're unable to work on this Mentimeter that we've got going, you can do the same exercise on our website. Or if you have friends, family, other folks that weren't able to attend tonight, they can do the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about what these important things are. The first question, this is really for everyone, and you can just text your answer on your phone. What's the most important thing to you to meet your transportation needs? And everyone's different. It could be access to a bus. It could be safer roads. It could be just about anything. So we'd like to hear from you about what those things are. And if you type that in on your phone or tablet or your device of choice, you can just hit submit and we'll be able to see that on the screen. Some things that we've seen in the past are bus stop locations. We've also seen folks talk about better connections getting to and from work, college, other areas. And we've also had folks talk about different opportunities to improve potholes and other things in their areas. So any of these pieces will be great. If you've got something you want to add, please feel free to do so. I'm going to ask Dana, because I'm not seeing the attendees list, but can you in the chat just let me know how many attendees you're seeing and if those folks are staff or maybe a good opportunity to save this for later. Okay, we've got 5 folks. So if you can, if you can't, don't worry about it. But if you can, this is the information we're trying to get. There we go. Better transit, improved roads. So those are things we hear about quite a lot. Currently in Fresno County, the pavement condition in the county is a little lower than folks would like. It has actually gone down about 10, 15 points in the last 8 to 10 years. And one of the things people talk about is the need to improve the local roadway system so that it's, safer, smoother, and better. Likewise, for better transit, We've talked to folks throughout the county who've mentioned the ability to get from, one end of town to the other, and the challenges of getting, let's say, for medical appointments or whatnot, getting into the downtown Fresno area or to the train station or to the airport. So streets safe to drive on, improved roads, better transit. These are all consistent with what we've been hearing throughout the last couple of months. And one thing that I want to make you aware of, that we are going to be posting on our website the results of a lot of our surveys and other information that have been gathered, not only by the friends at Fresno COG, but also by our partners at Transportation for All, because these efforts are now moving together as one county, one plan, as we try to move forward to a shared vision. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question, and this one really relates to how you get around. For you, for your household, what's the primary mode of transportation? When you're going to go someplace, how are you most likely to get there most of the time? Are you driving your own car, taking a carpool, walking or biking, or using transit? And what we have heard from the surveys and whatnot is that the majority of folks are in fact using their own cars. And the reason that they cite most often is because it allows them the flexibility to choose when they leave, when they return, and to be sort of in charge of their own transportation decisions. But that being said, there are a lot of folks that would really like to be able to do other things or have other options if they were available. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as we move towards the next part of the workshop. So here's one for those of you that face transit issues, transit services, and this may be you, this may be anecdotal of someone you know, but what problems do you think people face getting transit services? And this can be anything from the cost to access, timing. We spoke with some students, for example, at local colleges, and they say that there are challenges getting later buses when classes are having their time that they get out. There's a good one, too slow compared to driving, the length of time that it takes in order to manage a trip to get you from one place to another. So that could be really challenging for folks. Are there others that you can think of for my 4 or 5 people that are playing at the moment? And since we didn't really have folks that were doing transit on this one, I think I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So now this is a priority question, and it was very interesting. We had a meeting earlier today where we were talking about overall priorities. So in this case, you have 5 categories to choose from. And what I'm asking you to do is pick the category that is most important to you first, and then the second, and then the third, the fourth, and the fifth. So you're essentially ranking these. And once you've got them in the order that you like, you hit submit each time you go first, second, and there we go. So as you can see here, we've got lots of folks weighing in, and it's a little race with a little thumbs up there. Thank you, whoever gave us that one. So we've got 3 other folks. We'd sure love to hear you pop in on this. I can tell you that we've answered or asked this question several thousand times, and we are hearing from folks that better roads and transit are pretty much at the top, following bike walking paths today. And some of you have actually put something in for other. And I'm going to ask you, if you did put other, if you wouldn't mind in the chat telling us what other means to you. What was your intention when you said other? What types of priorities, transportation should be prioritized in your area? And you can put that right in the chat, which is in the lower part of your screen. There's a little thing that says chat, and we'll be able to see that if you choose to share that information with us. So these are important for us because we're trying to figure out if people have one thing that is more important than another, because all of these things are important when they are collectively put together to have a transportation network, right? So you may only be interested in roads during the weekdays, but perhaps you're interested in bike lanes and walking paths on the weekends. So it's important for all of us to have a transportation network that is connected. Okay, not seeing anything else on the other there, so I will move on here. Now, these are agree, disagree statements. So these are some posts that basically say, do you strongly agree or do you strongly disagree? So the first question is, we should prioritize improving our local roads. Local roads in this context means the roads in your neighborhood, the roads that get your kids to school, the roads that you take for going shopping, bopping around, all the kind of things. They're not the major highways. This is the local roads. The second one is a statement for transit, that we should increase funding for transit. We currently have, as I mentioned, about 24% that goes for transit and transit programs. Is that enough? Should it be more? Is it about right? So this is saying we should increase funding for transit. And then the third statement relates to bikes and pedestrian trails. Do we need more of these? Do we have enough? If we are having enough, that would be in the middle. If you strongly disagree, to the left. If you strongly agree, to the right. And what I'm seeing on this particular one at this point in time is that folks are pretty certain about the local road improvements, but we're looking at some perhaps some leaning towards, let's talk about that, but acceptance for increasing funding for transit and also looking at bike and pedestrian trails. And remember, these can also be trails within existing communities. They can connect communities. So there's lots of opportunity for talking about that. Okay, so let me go on to this next one. Now, we call this the money shot. So everything is important, but we only have so much money. And while $10 billion sounds like a lot of money, transportation projects and investments can be very costly. So what you're seeing here is your opportunity to tell us how you would allocate funds for each of these 5 categories. The first being local streets and roads. And this would be, again, the local roads in your community. It might be some larger roads if you live in a more urban area. That would qualify as like Shawd and others. Transit is basically the bus services, bike, ped, and other modes. That would be bicycle, pedestrian, trails, that sort of thing. And then regional projects, those would be things like an interchange or perhaps a very large project like Herndon, which turned into an expressway. And these are those projects that benefit us all in a regional sense. The airport investments are considered a regional project. And you may have something else entirely that you would like to see funded, and you can put that in the other category. And there are all kinds of things out there that we've heard on everything from electric vehicle or alternate fuels, as well as things like use of technology to improve transit overall. And you can allocate these funds however you see fit. We've asked this question a couple thousand times, and this is just a snapshot of what we're seeing this evening. But when we ask this question to other folks, it changes depending on where we are. But thus far, we have seen local roads continue to be at the top of the list. We are going to publish the results of all these surveys that we've done, not only in workshops like this one, live workshops, meetings, but also online surveys and our partners that have been doing canvassing in neighborhoods, door-to-door conversations with folks. And so all of that's going to be available next week, which I think will be very helpful. I didn't see anybody having other, but in this one, we're currently seeing basically 60% to local streets and roads, 25% to transit, 10% to bikes and pedestrians, and 5% for regional projects. And you can imagine, depending on where you live or where you work, everyone has a slightly different idea about what that's going to look like. And so things move around depending. I just saw someone for number 3 come in. We've got 2 more folks. I'll give you a few more minutes, see if you can pop in there and help us out with that one. But the fun thing about this is that the information is being shared with our steering committee, and our steering committee I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. So here's a good question. This is pretty easy. What is your zip code? And we're asking questions about zip codes so that as we complete our outreach and engagement, we're able to make sure that we've been connecting with folks throughout the county and not in just one area or another, but in fact that we're getting as many people as possible that are participating. Because depending on where you live, if you're in a downtown urban area or in one of our more rural communities, people have different viewpoints on these things. So thank you for sharing that. My next slide, I normally say with this, please don't lie. We really want to know how old you are. We have been making an effort as all of us to make sure we have as many different age groups as possible. And so we're looking obviously for folks that are younger, folks that are older. So anything you can share with us, we appreciate. And again, it's trying to make sure that we are getting a cross section of people with different challenges and different needs within the community. So thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about timeline, and I want to explain also how this is working. So beginning in basically March, April of this year, the Fresno Council of Government started a really aggressive outreach program. And at the same time, our friends at Transportation for All were running a parallel outreach engagement. And beginning in basically May, April, at the direction of the board, we have merged those two efforts. So we have a steering committee that's made up of 36 individuals representing diverse groups throughout the county. So each of our local cities has a member that is serving. The city of Fresno has 3. And then we have 12 folks that are representatives from the varying groups that are part of the Transportation for All effort. And we have an additional, I think it's 6 folks that are representing other interests. So altogether, these 36 people are getting information fed back to them from our local agencies, from all of this outreach, and they're having these ongoing discussions that talk about what this measure should look like. So your input is extremely important to that. Next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the allocation by categories. What kinds of investments would people like to see? And then we'll move on to be talking about the allocations by agency. In other words, how do we figure out what percentage is given to each of the local cities as well as the county? Then we'll move into what's called governance and oversight. And that's really the guardrails for the measure itself to make sure that there are things in place that ensure that the funds are spent by the agencies in the way that the voters wanted them to be, and also to make sure that there's follow-up audits and other types of oversight that make sure it works well. And then we'll have 2 more meetings, possibly a third, to basically finalize the draft engagement, the draft expenditure plan, and then bring that back out to the public. So we're planning on having a really large event on September 27th. That is a Saturday. And at that time, you'll be invited to attend and participate with basically all of us and share what you think about the plan that's been created by the steering committee. Now, all along the way, our elected officials from the Fresno Council of Governments and the Fresno County Transportation Authority will be voting about these. These are groups that are basically made up of all of your mayors and representatives from the Board of Supervisors. And they will be representing you, the electorate, and making sure that this plan does reflect what everybody wanted to see. If we are successful in this effort, then we'll have a measure that will be ready for folks to review probably in October of this year. And then if the local member agencies want to pursue that further, each local municipality will vote on it and support that effort. And then ultimately, there'll be a request made at the Board of Supervisors to place it on the November 2026 ballot. That's a tremendous amount of information, and I know it's a lot, and I do appreciate everybody's time in popping in. So I do want to be opening this up now to questions, which you can actually place in the Q&A section of this webinar. And as you do that, our team will be typing those in, and then we will respond to as many of those as we get. This may be the world's shortest meeting, but we do appreciate the folks that made the time to attend tonight. So you have any questions about Measure C, about the Measure C renewal process, or about any of the information that we shared with you tonight, now is the time to pop them in there. And I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Robert, did you want to make any type of a statement or say anything to the team?
Just that we really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for attending, and of course, we're always here to answer any questions should any arise. But we appreciate your enthusiasm for Measure C, and your questions and any concerns or comments that you may have. Please feel free to reach out to our office, and we'd be happy to discuss further with you. And again, thank you for your time. We know your time is valuable. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Well, This recording will be made available online at the measureC2026.com website. You're also able to review materials that were presented through the Measure C Steering Committee, and that includes information about pavement condition, the various elements of our transit services, and all the other information that's been compiled as part of this effort. The objective here is to be as transparent and to be as inclusive as possible with folks. So I think if you have the time, it's a great opportunity for you to learn more. I would also say again, next Wednesday's meeting is going to be looking at the allocations, and then we'll be doing an update for the Fresno Council of Governments Board on next Thursday. And if there are no questions and no other comments to be made, then I think we're going to be ending early, which is kind of interesting. But unless you object, Robert, I think we'll call it.
Thank you again. Thank you for being here. And have a
Thank you,
great night.
everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.